You stopped negotiating your worth, and it didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happened in a quiet series of decisions that finally added up to a new identity. The version of you who no longer begs to be handled gently. The version of you who no longer performs love like it's an audition. The version of you who no longer tries to convince someone to see what is already obvious. For a long time, you were the one who translated their inconsistency into excuses. You were the one who turned their distance into a challenge. You were the one who said, maybe if I'm more understanding, maybe if I'm calmer, maybe if I love them harder, they'll stop running. You tried to explain your needs in softer tones. You tried to shrink your feelings into something easier to swallow. You tried to make your standards flexible so the connection could survive. But every time you negotiated your worth, you paid a price. You paid with your sleep, with your appetite, with your self-respect, with that small ache in your chest that shows up when you can feel someone slipping away and you still keep reaching. And one day you looked at yourself, not with shame, but with honesty, and you realized, I am tired of proving I am valuable to someone who keeps treating me like I'm optional. That's when it began to change, not because you became colder, but because you became clearer. You stopped presenting your boundaries like a request. You stopped wrapping your needs in apologies. You stopped sending paragraphs that tried to make your pain understandable to someone who benefits from misunderstanding you. You stopped saying, it's okay, when it wasn't okay. You stopped accepting half-effort just because it was better than silence. You stopped rewarding mixed signals with full access to your heart. You finally understood something that should have never been questioned, that love without respect is a trap, that connection without consistency is a slow leak that drains you, that chemistry without care is not a relationship, it's a loop. And when you stop negotiating your worth, you stop trying to win them over with your patience. You stop trying to earn basic decency through emotional endurance. You stop treating your pain like it was a problem to solve instead of a message to listen to. You didn't become ruthless, you became real, and real is the thing a game cannot survive. Because the game only exists when you keep showing them you'll bend. When someone pulls away and you chase, they learn they can create distance and still keep you. When someone goes quiet and you fill the silence, they learn that your anxiety will do the work for them. When someone gives you crumbs and you call it progress, they learn they don't have to rise to meet you, they can simply wait for you to lower yourself. But when you stop negotiating your worth, the dynamic loses oxygen. You start responding differently. You pause before you reply. You stop answering instantly just to prove you care. You stop trying to fix it the second you feel tension. You begin to hold your standards the way you hold your values, calmly, firmly, without performance. You start acting like the kind of person who is not afraid to lose someone who refuses to treat you properly, and that energy is unmistakable. It's not loud, it's not messy, it's not dramatic, it's clean, and that cleanliness is what shakes people who are used to chaos. And you know what's powerful about this? It doesn't require you to hate them. You can still care, you can still feel love, you can still remember the good parts, and still decide that you will not live inside uncertainty anymore. That's the part that changes you from someone they can manage to someone they must respect. You stop negotiating your worth by stopping the emotional discounts. You stop offering partner-level access to someone showing up part-time. You stop making yourself available to confusion. You stop chasing clarity from someone who keeps moving the finish line. You start saying things like, "This doesn't work for me," and you say it without shaking, without pleading, without turning it into a debate. You don't threaten, you don't punish, you simply choose. And the choice is, I won't abandon myself to keep you. That's what self-respect looks like in real life. It's not a speech, it's not a quote, it's a consistent refusal to betray your own needs. The moment you stop negotiating your worth, you also stop making their behavior your identity. You don't take their distance as a verdict on your value. You don't take their silence as proof that you are unlovable. You don't take their indecision as a measurement of your beauty, your kindness, your importance. You start seeing patterns as information, not as invitations. You stop romanticizing potential and you start requiring reality. You stop saying, if I just hold on, they'll see me. And you start saying, if they can't see me now, they don't get to hold me in a half relationship. You stop doing emotional labor for free. You stop rewarding disrespect with access. You stop teaching people that your forgiveness is automatic and your boundaries are temporary. And it's not that you become heartless, it's that you become devoted, devoted to your peace, devoted to your future, devoted to the part of you that has been waiting for you to finally protect it. And when that shift happens, something almost scary happens too. You become steady. You stop being easy to provoke, easy to pull, easy to silence. You become the kind of person who can sit in discomfort without running back to the familiar pain. You become the kind of person who can miss someone and still not chase them. You become the kind of person who can love someone and still say no to the version of love that costs you your dignity. And that's when they realize they can't play with you anymore, because the old tricks don't work on someone who no longer negotiates their worth, someone who no longer confuses longing with compatibility, someone who no longer calls breadcrumbs effort, someone who finally decided that being chosen should not feel like being tolerated, and being loved should not feel like being managed. And your heart is not a toy that anyone gets to pick up only when it's convenient, and you don't need to prove you are valuable to someone who keeps acting like your absence is the only thing that makes them notice you. You became calm instead of reactive, and that change is so much deeper than people realize. Because calm is not silence, calm is not pretending you don't care, calm is not swallowing your feelings until they turn into bitterness. Calm is power that has stopped begging to be heard. Calm is a nervous system that finally decided it will not be held hostage by someone else's distance. Calm is the moment you stop letting their mood decide your worth. For a long time, your heart lived on high alert. Every delayed reply felt like danger. Every shift in tone felt like a threat. Every pullback felt like you were about to lose something precious. So you did what so many good, loving people do. You tried harder. You explained more. You reached first. You softened your needs. You carried the connection on your back because part of you believed that if you could just keep it alive, it would eventually become safe. But the problem with living like that is it teaches your body that love equals anxiety. It teaches your mind that closeness must be earned through effort, and it teaches the other person that your reactions will always fill the space where their consistency should be. Then one day you noticed something. You noticed how exhausted you were from reacting. Reacting to silence, reacting to mixed signals, reacting to the way they could disappear and return like nothing happened. Reacting to the way you kept giving them emotional access even when they were offering you emotional absence. You noticed how your dignity got smaller every time you sent the "Are you okay?" text that was really, of course they're okay, they're just comfortable knowing you'll do the emotional labor for both of you. You noticed how your heart turned into a monitor, constantly scanning for signs, constantly reading between lines, constantly trying to predict the next move. And you realized this is not love, this is survival, this is not a relationship, this is a nervous system addiction to uncertainty. So you chose calm, not to punish them, not to win, but to save yourself. Because calm is what happens when you stop trying to control the outcome and you start controlling your response. Calm is the moment you realize you do not need to chase clarity from someone who benefits from confusion. Calm is the moment you realize your worth is not proven by how long you can tolerate inconsistency. Calm is the moment you stop sending paragraphs that translate your pain, and you start living your truth in a way that doesn't require their permission. You stop reacting with panic, you stop reacting with anger, you stop reacting with emotional overexposure. Instead, you breathe, you pause, you let silence be silence, and you watch. You watch their effort. You watch their consistency. You watch their respect. And the calm in you becomes a mirror that shows them what they've been doing. Because when you're no longer reacting, they can't hide behind the story that you're too emotional, or too demanding, or too much. Your calm makes the pattern visible because it takes away the smoke. And let me tell you why this shakes an avoidance so deeply. Because they are used to distance being a button they can press. A button that creates chaos on your side while they stay protected on theirs. They pull away and you move closer. They go quiet and you fill the gap. They delay and you overthink. They withdraw and you chase. Your reactions used to reassure them of something, not love, but control. Control over access, control over the rhythm of the connection, control over your attention. But when you become calm, their button stops working. They press distance, and instead of you collapsing, you become still. You don't beg. You don't rage. You don't write a speech. You simply return to your life. And that is terrifying for someone who has been relying on your reactions as proof that they still matter, that they still have influence, that they can still return to the same comfort whenever they want. Calm also means you stop saying things you don't mean just to cope with fear. You stop threatening to leave when you're not ready to leave. You stop begging them to stay when you know you deserve better. You stop making emotional promises in the middle of emotional storms. You stop bargaining. You stop trying to win them back with extra sweetness after they hurt you, because you finally see that kindness without boundaries turns into self-abandonment. And instead, you become the kind of person who can say, I care, but I won't do this. You become the kind of person who can say, I'm not available for inconsistency without shaking. You become the kind of person who can feel grief and still keep your standards. That's not coldness, that's maturity, that's self-respect with a heartbeat. And yes, calm will feel unnatural at first because you trained your nervous system to believe that if you don't react, you'll lose them. You trained your heart to believe that silence means danger, that distance means you have to fix something. So the first time you choose calm, your body will scream. It will tell you to text, to call, to check, to explain, to do something. But you hold yourself anyway. You remind yourself that you are not here to be chosen by panic. You are here to be chosen by intention. You remind yourself that if someone only shows up when you react, they are not showing up for you. They are showing up for the control they had over you. You remind yourself that love should not require you to bleed just to be seen. And the calm becomes your new language. Your responses get shorter. Your boundaries get clearer. Your energy gets cleaner. You stop arguing for your needs like a lawyer defending a case. You stop trying to persuade someone to treat you well. You stop giving unlimited access to someone offering limited effort. And in that calm, something beautiful happens. You start hearing yourself again. You start feeling your own intuition again. You start trusting your gut again. You start noticing how peaceful your life is when you're not waiting for a message that decides your mood for the day. You start remembering what it feels like to be whole, to be steady, to not be tugged around by someone's inconsistency. And that's when the dynamic flips because they realize they can't play with you anymore, not because you fought harder, but because you stopped fighting to be chosen and you became someone who chooses themselves, calmly, firmly, and with a heart that finally learned it deserves peace. And that's when they realize they can't play with you anymore, because the old tricks don't work on someone who no longer negotiates their worth, someone who no longer confuses longing with compatibility, someone who no longer calls breadcrumbs effort, someone who finally decided that being chosen should not feel like being tolerated, and being loved should not feel like being managed. And your heart is not a toy that anyone gets to pick up only when it's convenient, and you don't need to prove you are valuable to someone who keeps acting like your absence is the only thing that makes them notice you. You removed access without drama. And that is the exact moment the entire dynamic changed, because the old pattern depended on you being available even when you were being mishandled. For so long, access to you was unlimited, your care was always on tap, your patience was always refillable, your forgiveness was always ready before they even earned it. You didn't just give love, you gave availability, you gave emotional entry, you gave front row seats to your heart, even when they showed up like a guest who could leave whenever they wanted. And you told yourself it was kindness. You told yourself it was loyalty. You told yourself you were being understanding. But deep down, you felt the ache of it, the ache of being there for someone who wasn't really there for you, the ache of being chosen in fragments, the ache of watching them come close, then vanish, and still knowing you would answer when they returned. Then something in you got quiet, not bitter, not angry, just clear. You realized that access is not love. Access is a privilege, and you had been handing out privileges to someone who wasn't meeting the standard. You had been offering partner-level access to someone acting like a part-time visitor, and the cost was your peace. Your mornings started with checking your phone, your nights ended with questions, your heart stayed tense because you never knew what version of them you'd get, and one day you decided, I will not be available to confusion anymore. Not as a threat, not as a power move, not as a game, but as a boundary that finally protected the part of you that kept getting bruised. Because you understood something important. When you keep giving access to inconsistency, you teach people that your heart can be borrowed without responsibility. Removing access without drama looks simple from the outside, but it is one of the bravest things a person can do because it requires you to stop chasing comfort in someone who keeps creating discomfort. It means you don't announce it with a speech, you don't post about it, you don't send 10 paragraphs trying to make them feel guilty enough to change. You simply change your behavior. You stop answering instantly. You stop rearranging your life to be convenient. You stop giving long emotional explanations to someone who only understands consequences. You stop letting your attention be the prize they win after doing the bare minimum. And you do it calmly because drama would keep you connected. Drama would keep the door open. Drama would give them a reason to call you too much so they can avoid accountability again. Your calm is what makes it real. Your calm is what makes it final. And here's why this hits so hard, because when you remove access without drama, you remove the loop they were relying on. The loop where they pull away, you chase. The loop where they go cold, you heat up. The loop where they disappear, then return with a small message, and you reward that small message with full emotional availability. But this time, you don't. This time, you don't punish, you don't beg, you don't explode, you don't collapse. You simply become unavailable to the same old cycle. You don't offer unlimited reassurance to limited effort. You don't offer emotional intimacy to emotional absence. You don't offer closeness to someone who keeps using distance as a shield. And suddenly they feel it. They feel the absence of the old access, and that absence is louder than any argument you could have made. Because what they really notice isn't your words, it's your shift. They notice that you're not as reachable. They notice that they can't drop a breadcrumb and get a feast. They notice that your energy is no longer waiting. They notice that you don't rush to fix what they keep breaking. They notice that your life looks fuller, steadier, quieter, and that quiet is not emptiness, it's strength. And for someone who is used to being able to return whenever it suits them, your boundary feels like a locked door they didn't expect. Not locked with anger, locked with self-respect, not locked with revenge, locked with reality. And reality is what they've been avoiding. But let's talk about you for a second, because removing access without drama is not easy when you have a good heart. A good heart wants to explain, it wants to soothe, it wants to make sure nobody feels abandoned, it wants closure that feels clean. And your good heart might whisper, maybe I should just send one more message. Maybe I should make sure they understand. Maybe I should give them one more chance. But you learned that some people don't change because you explained better. They change when the old benefits disappear. And you also learned that closure is not something someone gives you. Closure is something you decide. Closure is you saying, I will not keep reopening my wound just to prove I can love. Removing access without drama means you stop giving your nervous system away too. You stop letting their inconsistency dictate your day. You stop letting their silence become your obsession. You stop letting their late replies become a scoreboard. You stop treating every shift as a crisis. You let their behavior speak for itself, and you respond accordingly. You stop building a home in uncertainty. You stop placing your worth on their attention, and slowly your body starts to relax because it finally trusts you. It finally trusts that you will protect it. It finally trusts that you will not chase pain just because it's familiar. And if they come back, and sometimes they do, you don't meet them with open arms and no questions. You meet them with standards. You meet them with calm. You meet them with a version of yourself that doesn't accept almost. You don't punish them. You don't humiliate them. You simply require consistency. You require effort. You require clarity. You require respect. And if they can't offer that, you don't argue. You don't beg. You don't threaten. You just keep your boundary because your peace is not up for negotiation anymore. That's what it means when they realize they can't play with you anymore. Because the moment you removed access without drama, you stopped being the place they could return to without changing, and you became the standard they must rise to or lose completely. And that's when they realize they can't play with you anymore, because the old tricks don't work on someone who no longer negotiates their worth, someone who no longer confuses longing with compatibility, someone who no longer calls breadcrumbs effort, Someone who finally decided that being chosen should not feel like being tolerated, and being loved should not feel like being managed. And your heart is not a toy that anyone gets to pick up only when it's convenient, and you don't need to prove you are valuable to someone who keeps acting like your absence is the only thing that makes them notice you.